I'm Courtney. We're a family of 5 trying to grow as much of our own food as we can, and we raise chickens. Our kids wanted to name our little backyard farm, so we did. It's called Heart Pine Farms. Beets are a beautiful no-fuss veggie to grow in the garden that are a 2-in-1 crop. You can enjoy the greens and the roots. Here in Zone 7B, we grow beets in the spring and the fall. We'll show you our fall harvest of beets in this video, how we store our beets, and then how we prepare our raised bed for winter after we're done harvesting. It's November 19th and we're harvesting beets today. These are Early Wonder Tall Top beets. This variety will give you beautiful greens after about 40 to 45 days and baby beets that are maybe an inch in diameter. But if you leave them in the ground for at least 60 days, you'll have really good sized beets to harvest. The key to knowing when to harvest beets is obviously when they reach the size that you prefer. In the fall though, you can use your garden bed as an actual refrigerator and harvest them as needed, which is what we've done. These have been in here for a lot longer than 65 days just because we haven't gotten around to harvesting them yet. You can see that temperatures have gotten into the mid-20s. You can see that the greens have been nipped by the frost and freeze, even though we've covered them with frost blankets. But that's fine, that's not going to harm the actual beets. But because the greens are pretty much done, we're just going to harvest all of these beets right now. We planted beets in the spring and we also planted beets at the end of the summer so that we could have a fall harvest. I would say that the difference is in the spring when we planted them, we had 100% germination because the soil temperature, the weather was just perfect for germination at that time. And then the beets grew fine and we had a great harvest. Planting at the end of the summer in our zone where we are in upstate South Carolina, it's a little bit trickier because the optimal soil temperature for beet germination is from 50 to 80 to 85 degrees. And after we planted these, the beginning of September, we had some really hot weather. So I know the soil was more than 85 degrees. So we still have a pretty good amount of beets, but you can see that it was a little bit spotty. So in our zone, growing beets in the springtime getting them to germinate is actually easier, but they love the cool fall weather, so they grow great in the fall too, as long as you can get them to germinate. We normally direct sow beet seeds in our garden about a month before our last frost date, or as soon as the soil temperature reaches about 50 degrees. For our fall harvest, we aim to have our seeds planted about 2 months before our first frost date. That gives the beets enough time to mature before we're ready to harvest, and beets actually will sweeten up after a couple of frosts, but as you can see, if you're going for the greens, and the greens are really delicious sauteed, if you go for the greens, you'll want to have them harvested before the temperatures go down to about the mid-20s because they get destroyed when that happens. To harvest, I'm just going to take this trowel and kind of lift the beet up from the bottom and pull it out. That's a beautiful one right there. So I'm just going to set these aside right here, and then I'm going to show you how we are going to store these beets, and they actually last months this way, like 3 to 6 months. So I will show you that when we're done harvesting, but I'm just going to set them aside right here. This is a beautiful littler one. Wow, look at this one. They're so pretty. That's the other thing about growing beets. The color is so pretty. It's my favorite color. It's so pretty. Beets like loamy soil, so the more compost, the better. So right before we plant our beets, we add plenty of compost. And we don't fertilize, we just add compost, and then we just make sure that they have consistent water. We make sure the soil doesn't totally dry out, but we also make sure that the soil is not too soggy either if we can help it. These beets are nice because we plant them first thing in the spring. They don't take very long to mature, and then you can follow them up with your next crop for summertime. besides the greens, beets are so delicious roasted. That's probably one of our favorite ways to eat the beets, is roasted. And these garden beets, we don't remove the skin before we roast them. All we do is we just rinse the dirt off and then trim them up into maybe 1-inch pieces and add some olive oil and salt and pepper and roast them in the oven. I like to roast them with carrots and potatoes and sweet potatoes. Some of these I didn't thin very well and they turned out to be really tiny, but they will still eat them. I'll also show you what we're going to do with this bed when we're done pulling these beets out. The rest of our beds are full of cover crops right now, the ones that we're not growing fall crops in. And because it's too late to plant cover crops, I'll show you what I'm going to do with this vacant bed, because I do not want to leave it as is. You can see that the weeds are taking over, and in our growing zone we have winter annuals that will take over and spring annuals, and I also don't want to lose soil, so I'll show you what we'll do when we're done harvesting here. This beautiful one. Here's how we store our beets, and they store well for 3 to 6 months this way. And of course, while they're storing, you want to check on them, because if one of them starts to rot, the rest of them will quickly rot. So if you see one that's rotting, just remove it right away, and then the rest of your beets should be fine. So all we do is we remove the greens as close as we can here. Just trim them down. And we don't take the dirt off. All we do is we put them in a plastic bag and we store them in the back of our refrigerator or in the crisper drawer, or really wherever you have room in your refrigerator. And we poke holes in the bags for ventilation. So you could use plastic grocery bags or whatever plastic bags that you have laying around. So we just trim them and put them in the bags like that. It's really a quick and easy way to store beets. So if it were raining and these were really, really wet, I would let them dry out. These aren't bad here, but I would let them dry out before putting them into the bags. I like to do this right out in the garden because since we're not removing the dirt, it's just the most convenient spot to do this here. It's quick and easy. Okay, here's how we're going to winterize this bed that we just harvested from. First, I'm going to just do my best to get as many weeds out of this bed as I can. There's is no right or wrong way of winterizing your garden beds, but this is just the way that we do this after a fall crop because it's too late to plant cover crops in this garden bed. And I just don't really want to leave it vacant because what will happen is weeds will completely take over this garden bed and we will lose valuable soil. So what we're going to do is add a really thick layer of mulch on top, and this mulch is just fallen leaves and pine needles from the edge of our yard, but you could use whatever you have on hand: straw, fallen leaves, yard debris, pine needles, wood chips, whatever you have on hand. And we're just going to add this to the top of the bed so we have a good thick layer on top. So we have woods at the back of our yard, and so sometimes we'll just take fallen leaves and pine needles right from the edge if we need some. In our opinion, beets are a worthwhile vegetable in the garden, especially since they're a 2-in-1 crop harvested from the same plant. They're an undemanding crop to grow, and there are lots of fun varieties to choose from. We hope you'll enjoy growing and eating garden beets.